Dzień dobry, witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie na
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first conference before the local authority elections. I would like to welcome the members of the National Electoral Committee, the representatives of the Electorate Bureau, and you, ladies and gentlemen, the journalists, and everybody else who's been following us on our website. Over to Stefan Jaworski. Over to you, the Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome the representatives of the media and all the voters living in our country. Let me remind you that this conference has only been organized to present the state of preparation for the local government election held on the 16th of November 2014. The objective of the election is to vote for and elect representatives for the commune council, heads of councils, and councils of powiats or districts, and also for the voivodeships or provinces. In the case of Warsaw, the election is also for the borough councils of Warsaw. We are being provided services by Goldframe Media, which is the company that you should get in touch with if you want to get in contact with us. During this conference, we would like to tell you about how the National Electoral Commission will conduct its operations on the 16th of November. We will give you some statistical data on the election. We'll talk about the conduct of the voter and how voting is to be proceeded. We'll talk about election silence and also about how IT information technologies will be used during election. Let me also tell you that we have here with us the representatives of the company that has written the software for the National Electoral Commission, namely Maciej Zettler, the Deputy President of Namino, is here with us. As far as the operations of the National Electoral Commission on the day of election is concerned, we are going to organize 4 press conferences. First at 9:15 a.m., and that's going to be about the announcement about the commencement and conduct of the election. Then at 1:30 p.m., which is going to be the first conference about the turnout and the status as of 12 noon. We'll also provide information on the turnouts in the 18 largest cities in Poland. Then at 7 p.m. we'll hold a third conference, and that's going to be about the turnout and the proceedings of the election as of 5:30, and we'll provide data similar to those during the second conference. And then finally at 9:45 p.m. we are going to hold the last conference, providing you with the information on the end of the voting. And then during the night of the 16th and in the morning of 17th November, after all the committees have completed the work, the election is over, and the counting of votes has begun, we will provide partial, incomplete results of the voting, including percentage results for the councils and we'll talk about the mayors of the 18 largest cities, which are heads of our voivodeships or provinces in Poland. These partial results should be presented at 2:15 a.m. During that conference, we are going to present data as of 2. Then at 6:15, we'll present status as of 6 a.m. At 9:15, we'll provide information on the status as of 9. Then at 12 noon, quarter past 12 noon, we'll provide information as of 12 noon. And at 3:15 p.m., the status as of 3 p.m. And then any further press conferences, if they are organized, we'll keep you posted. I'll now give the floor to Włodzimierz Ryms, who's going to provide you with some basic statistical information on these elections. Thank you. After this conference is over, you can go to info.pkw.gov.pl and you will be able to read ample statistical information on this election. Let me just give you some basic stats, some figures that I believe are most important. In this election, we are voting for the councillors for 2,477 town and commune councils, 314 powiat councils, 16 councils of voivodeships, and the councillors for the different boroughs of Warsaw. As for commune councils, there were 39,500 councillors, 6,276 councillors for powiats, then 557 councils for the voivodeship level, and finally for the boroughs of Warsaw, there are going to be 423. We're also voting for over 1,200 heads of communes, over 100 mayors and heads of cities. In the commune of Zielona Góra and in the city of Zielona Góra, the election is not going to be held for the commune council, both for the city and for the commune of Zielona Góra. In the commune of Zielona Góra, the powiat and sejmik will be voted for, and in the city it's only going to be for the sejmik, or the council of the voivodeship. This results from the fact that as of the 1st of January 2015, these two organizational units, the city and the commune of Zielona Góra, will be combined. And that's why the election for the mayor of Zielona Góra and for the city council is going to be held later, after these two territorial units have been combined. We have registered 33 electoral committees, including 3 appointed by the electorate. Over 12,500 election committees have been registered. For commune councils, we have over 4,000 candidates. For the powiat level, we have 64,886 candidates. For the sejmik level, we have over 8,900 candidates. For the boroughs of Warsaw, we have 4,725 candidates. As for the voids, the mayors of towns and cities, we have 8,029 people as candidates. 38% of the candidates for councillors are women. As for void, head of commune and mayor of cities and towns, women make up 16% of the candidates. The election is going to be held in 27,500 committees with 39,000 members of the committees, of the district electoral committees. As for the number of voters, it's 30 million, including 637 people who are EU citizens without Polish citizenship. For the commune councils, they are going to be held in 37,000 single electoral constituencies. And these were the basic information samples. As for the full set of information, it's available on info.pkw.gov.pl. Over to Maria Grzelka, who's going to talk about how to vote. Voting at the polling station is the method which is most popular traditionally, and even though many people have voted before and they know how to do it, but nevertheless, let me remind everybody the main rules on how to vote in a polling station, in the typical situations. First of all, we vote at the polling station, which is under the District Electoral Commission, which includes our constituency or the place where we are domiciled. If we do not vote for the first time and we have forgotten which polling station we are supposed to go to, or if you do vote for the first time and you don't know where to go on the election day, then the simplest way to check that is at the posters which have been publicly shown in every commune, every residential district, sometimes pretty much on every street there are these announcement posters, and they have been around for a few weeks before the election date, so everybody will have had ample time to read these announcements. The announcement also contains information for the disabled voters to tell them which district electoral commissions have polling stations that are suitable for the disabled. A disabled person can go to have the right to choose the polling station they prefer, but this decision has to be made before the election date. On the 16th of November, we should be at the polling station at any time between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. If we happen to come to the polling station right before 9 p.m., and if we haven't had the time to cast a ballot before the end hour of 9 p.m., then no harm is done, because if you arrive at the polling station before 9 p.m., you can also continue, you can vote after 9 p.m., as long as you came to the station before 9. Please remember to take an ID document with you in order for the members of the polling station to check your identity. This could be an identity card. Mind you, you have to have one of the new ID cards issued in recent years rather than the old booklet type of ID, or any other official document that contains your photograph and your personal data that are comparable to the data on the list of electorates.
Znaczy wyborca w lokalu wyborczym kasuje swój dowód pozwalający ustalić.
After coming to the polling station, you have to present your ID to the members of the committee.
Czy wyborca umieszczony jest
And this is in order to check whether you are on the electorate list.
nie figuruje
If you are not present
w lokalu obwodowej komisji
on the
wyborczej,
list,
zgłosiła, to
if you have not been entered on the list, then you can be added to it on the election day
spisu wyborców przez obwodową komisję
by the members of the District Electoral Commission. But in order for that to be done, you have to show that you reside in a given commune, and if the commune office confirms the fact that you have not lost the right to vote and that you have not been entered on the election list in any other district.
uważa się, że został on dopuszczony do
And then, after you've been entered on the list, you have the right to vote at that particular voting station,
głosowania, które każdy wyborca
and then you are given the ballot,
potwierdza swoim podpisem.
which the reception of which you have to sign for.
Ilość tych kart może być różna.
The number of ballots can differ from one place to another, and the colors are different. If you are voting in a commune which is not considered a city or a town, you receive four ballots
Kartę do
for the
głosowania
commune council, for the powiat council,
do sejmiku województwa,
for the sejmik or the council of the voivodeship,
wójta.
and for the head of the commune.
W miastach na prawach powiatu
In
wyborca otrzymuje
a town
kart do głosowania.
or a city, you receive 3 ballots.
Głosowania w wyborach do Rady Miasta,
One for the
kartę
city
do
council,
głosowania w wyborach do sejmiku województwa i
one
kartę
for
do
the
głosowania
council of the
w
voivodeship, and one for the mayor of the city. In the capital city of Warsaw, you will also receive 4 ballots,
głosowania, a to karta
and
do
they are
głosowania
as
w
follows.
wyborach do Rady Dzielnicy,
The borough
do głosowania w
council
wyborach do Rady Miasta Stołecznego
ballot,
Warszawy,
city council
głosowania w wyborach do
ballot,
Sejmiku Województwa Mazowieckiego i karty do
voivodeship
głosowania w
council
wyborach
ballot,
w wyborach prezydenckich.
and a ballot to vote for the mayor of Warsaw.
Karty różnią się od siebie kolorami.
The ballots are of different colors,
Figuruje tytuł
and each of them has a clear
głosowania w
title
których wyborach. Na każdej karcie wyborczej
to
jest
show
też pouczenie o
which particular type of election this ballot is for.
do rad gmin.
And as far as
Gmin, karty wyborcze mają kolor biały.
commune councils,
Do
these are white
wyborach
ballots.
do rad powiatu
Powiat council or borough council, in the case of Warsaw, that's the yellow paper.
w wyborach do sejmiku województw karty
For the
wyborcze
council of the
mają
voivodeship,
kolor
that's
niebieski,
the blue
a
ballot,
w wyborach wójtów,
and
burmistrzów,
the
prezydentów
mayor's,
karty wyborcze mają kolor.
that's pink.
Myślę, że dobrze jest podkreślić, co zresztą w materiałach informacyjnych przed dzisiejszą konferencją wielokrotnie
As we have emphasized on
przedstawiciele Państwowej Komisji
many
Wyborczej,
occasions,
inni informujący podkreślali, że na każdej karcie do głosowania
every
powinien
ballot
postawić tylko jeden znak
can only contain one mark which you write in it. In other words, you can only select one option.
dwie przecinające się w obrębie
You vote
określonej
by putting an X sign in the right field next to the name. So it could be an X, a cross,
jakieś pod innym kątem usytuowanie tych dwóch przecinających
it doesn't have to be an exact X sign, but it has to be very clear. It has to be 2 lines crossing, and they mustn't go outside of the boundaries of the bullet point or of the empty square.
stawia się z lewej strony obok nazwiska wybranego przez
The box is ticked to the left of the name of the candidate you want to vote for. If
w
you
wyborach radnych w gminach nie będących zarządzających miastami
vote in the
na prawach powiatu,
commune election
burmistrza oraz prezydenta.
and in the mayor election,
Głosowanie na tego
that means that
właśnie
you are voting for this particular person, for the person whose name the cross has been put next to. In other words, your vote is going to be deemed invalid if you take more than one candidate or if you haven't ticked any names.
postawienie wymaganego znaku w wyborach radnych w gminach
As for the
na prawach powiatu, w wyborach radnych
town
do rad
commune
powiatu,
councils,
sejmiku województw,
voivodeship council,
rad dzielnic miasta
and
stołecznego,
borough council elections, you vote for a particular
pierwszeństwa do uzyskania
list of candidates,
kandydata z tej listy przy nazwisku
and by ticking a name, you are voting both for the whole list and also for this particular person as your preferred person.
postawiony zostanie
If you tick
w stosunku do kandydatów dwóch lub więcej z różnych
more than one name, it's not going to be invalid unless you take names from different election lists.
ale na tej samej liście kandydatów.
In other words, if you tick more than one name, but all of these names are from the same election list, then your vote will be valid, and it will be considered that you voted for the first person on the list that you ticked.
Znaku, o którym jest mowa, musi nastąpić wyłącznie w obrębie kartki.
We also have to remember
W
that
obrębie tej kartki innego znaku, aniżeli, jak wspomniałam, dwie przecinające się
the sign that you use for voting,
albo zamazanie tej
where you tick someone, is two lines that
powodują
are in the shape of an X or a cross. If you use any other mark, then your vote will be invalid.
ujętych skreśleń, stawiania znaków w warunkach tajności, ponieważ
Obviously,
przygotowane są specjalne
ticking the box and the process of voting is confidential. You'll be doing it in a booth so that you are invisible to anyone else. And then also, after voting, you cast the ballot into the voting box. And you have to remember
nie wolno wynosić poza
that you mustn't take the ballots out with you from the polling station.
możliwości, żeby mogła być
It is also not allowed to issue more than one
przykład, jeśli wyborca powie,
set of ballots. For example, if you say, I made a mistake, I put the wrong sign there, or something went wrong, you cannot receive another ballot.
grubsza rzecz biorąc, wygląda zachowanie się wyborcy
So this is the way you should vote at a polling station.
głosować przez pełnomocnika i wtedy pełnomocnik
You can also vote through a plenipotentiary or a proxy, and the same rules apply to the proxy.
pełnomocnik okazuje obwodowej
The
komisji
proxy, when they come to the polling station, they have to show their power of attorney.
dowód pozwalający stwierdzić jego tożsamość, kwituje własnym nazwiskiem.
Then they have to sign when they receive the set of ballots.
Głosowania, no, a następnie głosuje, czyli stawia określone znaki zgodnie, tak powinno być, z wolą.
And then they tick in accordance to the wish of the person who granted the power of attorney.
Osoby niepełnosprawne
We also have to remember that as for the disabled,
korzystać z
they can
pomocy osób
use the assistance of third parties, including minors.
musi ograniczać się wyłącznie do
But the assistance should only be about some technical things like helping this person sit down or get up, or helping them read the names, help them put the sign on paper, but
głosującej zawsze była
the accompanying person mustn't influence the will or the choice of the disabled person.
uprawiania w lokalu wyborczym agitacji. Tej pomocy
No canvassing can be done in the polling place.
ani będą są. Generalnie więc, po tym może odrobinkę przy długim wystąpieniu, ale jednak naprawdę przedstawiającym te
After this
sytuacji typowej,
short introduction to how we should go about voting,
że głosujemy
we have
w
to
swoim lokalu wyborczym,
remember that we just the key facts. You vote in your own polling station that you are ascribed to, and please remember that you only put one sign at one ballot, so you just vote for one name.
których umieszczone są nazwiska kandydatów na listach kandydatów,
If we have a list of candidates,
które zawierają listy kandydatów, wybieramy jednego
you
kandydata
vote
na
for
jednej
one
liście
candidate
kandydatów.
from a list.
Pamiętajmy o tym, żeby znak, który stawiamy w kratce na to przeznaczone,
And please remember
bo to też
that
wpływa
we use the right sign for voting, the cross or the X. Thank you. Let me now ask Andrzej Kisielewicz to take the floor, who will talk about the duties following from the election silence. Ladies and gentlemen, election silence covers the day of voting and 24 hours prior to the beginning of the day of election. And election silence is a period when any canvassing is forbidden, and also publishing the results of polls is forbidden, both pre-election polls and exit polls. Our electoral law defines what canvassing is, so we know exactly what not to do during the period of election silence. According to our election law, canvassing includes public attempts at persuading or coercing to vote for a particular party or a list of candidates or a particular candidate. We also have to remember that the breach of election silence is punishable. Canvassing during election silence is a misdemeanor, and it can be fined with an amount of between 50 and 5,000 zlotys. And then the other breach, which is publishing polls results, either before the election or exit polls, which is considered a crime, and the fine can be from 500,000 zlotys to 1 million zlotys. What follows from this is that any breach of election silence is dealt with by the police, the prosecutor's office, and courts. And that's why the National Electoral Commission always makes a point of only talking in very general issues, or how election silence is defined, because we don't want to encroach on the jurisdiction of the law enforcement agencies and the courts. But let me now formulate two basic rules of thumb, if you will, to make it easier for everybody to answer the question when we can talk about a breach of election silence. First of all, this can happen through our actions during election silence. So it will not be considered a breach if the actions we undertook were before election silence and their results remain available. A very simple example is the posters, the advertising posters for different candidates. Obviously, you do not have to remove the posters at the beginning of election silence. And also another example would be newspapers. A newspaper that was published and distributed before the commencement of the election silence, even if they cover the date of the election. And then another important element on What canvassing is the public character of what we do in order for this act to be breached. Let me say again that canvassing or campaigning is when you are doing it publicly, when you are trying to publicly influence other people's choice of vote. So we always have to bear in mind whether something is public or not. Our electoral law does not define what this public character is, so we have to use common sense approach in how this is commonly understood. I think in general we can say that a public activity is one that is targeted at the general public, that is targeted at people who are not listed by name, so to say. So if anyone, or if anyone potentially can get access to this information, then this could be construed as public canvassing and campaigning. And that's it. Thank you. Over to Mr. Wojciech Czaplicki, who will now talk about the use of information technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, for some weeks now, the public has been hearing from the media about the impending disaster of the National Electoral Commission as a result of the IT system that's being prepared. So the image of the IT system in the media is one of a disaster. Now, I will not hide it from you. There are some challenges, but let me explain the reasons for these challenges and what it's all going to look like on the 16th of November, when the election day begins. There have always been problems with the IT system. There have always been some challenges, but the situation now is that there's a large number of different reasons, drivers that have compounded. First of all, the changes in the IT systems are the result of a number of factors. First of all, the electoral law has been amended, as a result of which you always have to look at the current IT system to make sure whether it is still compliant with the new law. And secondly, information technology is developing very rapidly, and this includes both software and hardware. And this is the situation before this election. As you know, the electoral law was it came into force in 2011, before the parliamentary election. As a result, brand new software was necessary. At the time, we had to create a system that would be operational in time for the parliamentary election, but then, not a long time later, we had the European Parliament election. And we proposed to open a tender for a unified electoral platform that could be used for all types of elections in Poland. Sadly, I had to cancel the tender because there have been protests lodged by potential bidders. We didn't have enough time to start the procurement procedure over, so I had to focus on the closest upcoming election, which was the European Parliament election. The company that won the tender created brand new software for that particular election. Then we had the additional election for the Senate, and again, through a tender, another company won. Nabino, the company whose representative is here with us. So basically, with every election, we have had a new software provider. As it turns out, it is practically impossible for a new company to use the software that another company created in the past. It is easier to create a new software module than reviewing every line of code written by the previous company and analyzing, wondering what that programmer was thinking about when writing the code. So that's what the situation was in this case. Nabino was the only company that participated in the tender, and obviously it won the tender. And why was it a tender? The National Electoral Commission and National Electoral Office are not exempt from the public procurement law. In other words, whenever we want to purchase services, including IT, software or hardware services, we have to go through the public procurement process. And some of these tenders have also got to be published in the European official journal if they exceed a certain amount in terms of their value. So they have to be published Europe-wide, and that makes the whole process longer. Last year, we approached the Internal Security Agency and the Public Procurement Office and asked them whether IT services, such as preparing a comprehensive IT system, is that something that's considered important for the security of the state? Obviously, that is the case, because if someone is able to influence the election, then they can influence the future of our state. And the Agency of Internal Security confirmed our opinion. They also believe that this sort of activities are important for the security and safety of the country. The Public Procurement Office gave a bit of a vague answer, saying that basically yes, but that you can ensure safety, but for example demanding some certificates from the bidders. But obviously that is never going to provide us with security. So what did we do next? On the 8th of October this year, a group of MPs asked the Parliamentary Digitization Committee to gather, and the subject of the meeting was the information that we provided them with on the breakdown of the IT system. Or maybe that's the wrong word. It did not stop working, but the system was very slow. So it's sort of like a traffic jam. The system did not have the right capacity during the additional elections for Senate. Me and Director Drapiński presented the situation to the Parliamentary Committee. There was a very interesting discussion, and I encourage everybody to go to the Parliament's website and look at Committees tab, where you have the minutes of the meeting. It was indeed a very interesting and very factual meeting. So we said again during that meeting that the National Electoral Office and National Electoral Commission should be exempt from the public procurement law. The Commission for Administration and Digitization concurred, and their conclusion was sent to the Committee for Economy, which is responsible for public procurement. And the same postulate of excluding us from public procurement was passed on. Mind you, I'm only talking about the safety and security of elections, for that to be excluded from public procurement law. So we have to wait and see what happens in the future. But right now, we had to use the provisions of the public procurement law. So we had a tender, and the company that won the tender is basically building the module from scratch as a result of the amendments in the law and the fact that they cannot use software that was written by someone else before. Then we had a tender on IT services during the election. Two companies provided their bids. This, after all, is a very niche thing. Large IT companies don't want to do that because it's probably not very economically feasible for them. Which is not to say that Nabino or any other company is going to lose money, by no means, but they are smaller companies and they're more flexible, and they also want to have that prestige factor. However, none of the bids, or neither of the bids, I should say, met all the requirements. And these additional elections are coming up very soon, and the problem is, what do we do? We believe that if we were excluded from the public procurement law, then we would be able to move much faster, find a company, have a long-term relationship with them. Then the company would know all the software modules and would know what modifications could be introduced. I'm not mentioning any particular company at the moment because that's not my interest at the moment. What I'm interested in is to have an IT system that works well. As a result, I'll now ask the CEO of Nabino, Mr. Sarc, to deliver his statement about the situation that we had in the past. As I said, a lot has been said about it in the media recently. Over to you, Director.
Zaproszę pana prezesa do mnie. Panie prezesie. Panie prezesie.
Czas zmieniać miejsce.
Dziękuję.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to respond to the critical publications on the IT system for the National Electoral Commission that was designed to provide IT services during election. I would like to inform everybody that the IT system was created in collaboration with Nabino and the IT specialists from the National Electoral Commission. The tasks put before Nabino was to create a system for gathering protocols, creating a module for the turnouts information collection on the election day, and another module to determine the results of the voting, the results of the election, as well as a module to administer all the IT and telecoms infrastructure provided by the National Electoral Commission, or NEC. The NEC prepared the module for registering the candidates and for the particular districts, and they provided the IT infrastructure. Two stress tests have been carried out, the first of them on the 31st of October and the other on the 7th of November. The objective was to test the capacity of the IT system. I have to emphasize that the load tested during these tests was much higher than the load during the election day. Our task was to get information on the turnout from all the districts and to receive all the 120 protocols from all the district committees in 2 hours. In real life, on the 16th of November, these 120,000 protocols will be collected over a period of 8 to 10 hours. So that's going to be 8 hours more than we had during the tests. Correspondingly, the load on the system and the load on the IT infrastructure will be significantly lower. However, the stress tests have enabled us to improve the configuration of the IT infrastructure, in particular the communication between hard drive arrays and the servers. And as a result, we've introduced a number of modifications both on the IT infrastructure side and on the software side. The hardware was expanded by adding new servers. We improved the interface between the arrays and the servers. The fiber optics switch that failed during the second test was replaced, and we have given up virtual environments in favor of physical environments. We would also like to pick up on the information provided by Rzeczpospolita Daily. There was a request for comment from the Internal Security Agency pursuant to an email they received from one of the internet users who asked the agency whether it was normal that a local test system is made publicly available to a wider group of people through a website. Since the tests carried out meant that we had to have had a large group of people, there was no password for the test website. However, there were absolutely no confidential data available on the test website. In other words, no information that could impact the safety and security of the system was available to anyone. Director Drapiński responded to the Internal Security Agency. The agency thanked us for responding, and that's how the case was closed. But pursuant to some of the apprehensions, we did start password protection of the website. Now, let me remind everybody that we are talking about over 230,000 candidates in over 114,000 lists that have to be processed by the system. And there will be millions of operations on all the ballots that we receive in the system. So this is a very large load. Ladies and gentlemen, both Mabino and the National Electoral Committee have the same objective, which is to make the counting as precise and efficient as possible. I would like to thank everybody involved in the preparation of this process. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take questions, and Daria is going to hand over the microphone to whoever is asking. Łukasz Walewski from Radio 3. Now, to summarize, I understand that the CEO is here with us, but I think millions of voters are not interested in the details of the technicalities, but what we are interested in is that at 9 p.m. on 16th of November, we'll see that everything has went smoothly and that there were no problems. This is my first question. I will also have some other questions to the remaining members of the panel. Yes, we do hope that the system will be operating properly. With all due respect, sir, but hope is not enough. We have to have a guarantee. Next question, please. Sir, I'm absolutely serious in my question. Can you guarantee that there will be no problems coming from the IT system on the election day? The way we have organized this election is that it's going to go smoothly, and the counting of votes and the transmission of data is operative. What do you mean by this word operative? We would have to go back to the beginning of the conference and start over with presenting all the information on the organization of the election, on how the tests were carried out, on how the IT system operates, and on all the changes and amendments in the law, as well as our resolutions on the electoral law. Sir, we have heard all that and we know that, but the public would like to hear from you, from the most important institution dealing with the elections, about this guarantee. All I can say at the moment is that as of today, the National Electoral Commission accepts as reliable the information we received from our IT department and from the CEO of the company, that the IT system will operate effectively. Thank you, sir. Now a question to Minister Czaplicki. Why didn't the NEC inform us about these legal challenges about the tender before? Well, the NEC has informed everybody on many occasions, in fact. It was talked about in the Parliament, and also the public were informed about all of that. Repeating the same thing over and over again would seem like we're complaining. We are not complaining, we are just informing that the current legal status means that at some point in the future it might be impossible to carry out an election. And we've been fighting for this situation to change. We've been talking to the government and to the Parliament. We have to remember that this very, very hard work of the NEC employees must not be wasted. We are not receiving the funding we need. We are not receiving additional FTEs to have more IT and legal specialists. We are understaffed. And all of this information is available on our website, on the Parliament's website. The Parliamentary Committee wants us to have a larger budget, and the Finance Committee cancels these increases. And we have talked to the Speaker of the House, we have talked to the Prime Minister, Ewa Kopacz, asking them to show some interest in this. Let me be very blunt. These days, you cannot work with just having 5 IT specialists at the NEC. You have to have more than that. Thank you. 2 more questions to the CEO. You clarify the issue of what that internet user said. Wasn't that a mistake on your part, that the environment for testing was not password protected and anybody would have access to the software, right? Now, there are 2 types of tests. We have internal tests done by the company, where we are trying to make sure that everything is in line with the law. And then we have stress tests, and that's on the 31st of October and the 7th of November, 2 separate stress tests. On the 31st of October and the 7th of November, the tests were carried out on the NEC infrastructure, hardware, and there was no interface between that and our infrastructure. So that website visited by that internet user, it was just a log-on website where they could enter. It was not connected to the real software on our side. Thank you. And the very last question from me. We talked about canvassing and campaigning during election silence. Many of our Radio 3 listeners would like to hear about this problem online, especially in terms of the social network sites. For example, if someone likes a candidate's profile on Facebook, is that canvassing, is that campaigning? Or if you publish somebody's election slogans? Well, internet is one of the media, so anything that's done online can be treated as the breach of the election silence, because it can be construed as public activity. But, as we said before, we would like to avoid answering about these particular cases that might happen when election silence might be breached. because this is not within our sphere of competence. This is in the sphere of competence of the law enforcement agencies. And that's an element of the public governance and order, that we should not encroach on each other's competences. And you've given us a very specific example. I don't know if clicking like on Facebook is in line with the criteria or not. This is for the court to decide. And Polish Radio, IAR. If I may, I would like to go back to the issue of the IT system. Let me put this question from a different angle. If there are some defects in the system, then how will it impact the voter? To what extent will that impact the information from the NEC? Any potential defects, that I think that there will be none, but if there are some, that will not have any impact on the result of the election, because we are using the traditional paper ballot counting system. The electronic system is only there as a support system, as the minister said. The IT system supports it. It helps us transmit data and checks the protocols. So even if the system failed, which is unlikely, then we are still able to carry out the election and provide a reliable result, although it might take a bit longer than with the IT system. Maybe Judge Zabłocki can tell you more. Ladies and gentlemen, I can see that the atmosphere here is getting heated, not just because of the spotlights. So let me try to tackle this. I've been on the NEC for 23 years, so I've got some experience, I think. And let me say like this. This is not the most comfortable situation, that's true, but it is far from being a disaster, which is what, as the minister said, the media have been saying. To go back to one of the first questions from the first journalist, as you know very well, even if all the tests were passed with flying colors, and even if today the system worked absolutely perfectly, then, and I'm going back to your question, can we provide a guarantee that the system will work on election day? It will work perfectly? The answer would always be no. It's all about IT. It's all an IT system. There are no guarantees. We can provide you with a different guarantee. We can provide you with a guarantee that the election will be carried out in a reliable, effective way. And even if the system fails, we can provide you the guarantee that the election will be done as it should be. Now, the reason I'm so optimistic about it is that, like I said, back in 1991, when I started working for the NEC, back then, obviously, we had nothing like the software we have today. We had nothing like the technical capabilities that we've got today, but we had elections, the results were published, the results were reliable, and so forth. So that's the same that's going to happen today. Obviously, technological progress has been enormous, so the expectations from the public are larger, so that's clear. But obviously, we're all serious people here, so we know that we have to have some backup plans. If, for example, the capacity of the system is not perfect on the election day and on the following day, Monday, then nothing will stop us from providing the data on electronic carriers that will be transported from the district committees and then uploaded. So the same end result is going to be there. It's just going to take longer. Dr. Lepiński probably will be able to tell you more, or maybe the CEO of the company, about the details, but that's not going to take very long. It's just a matter, I suppose, about 24 to 48 hours. But why should we be focusing on the pessimistic versions? We've not said one more thing that I think needs saying, namely, in this situation, we've also received what's called an audit. And we've got the results of the audit, and the audit, the system passed the audit. The auditing company has not determined any defects that might impede an effective election on the 16th of November. And finally, one more thing. Obviously, all your questions are justified, but please remember what the minister asked for, and I would like to join him in asking you, please make the effort of visiting our Parliament's website. From the main website, you click current work, and then to parliamentary committees, and look at the minutes from the 8th of October 2014. If you read the minutes from the 8th of October 2014, and that's the official minutes of the meeting of that commission, you will see what situation we are in terms of what we can do. And we will do all we can in order for the election to be reliable and effective. And that's the guarantee we are giving you. We will provide you with a link to that website. My question to Mr. Rims. How many constituents will not have the elections? I don't have this number with me, but this information is going to be shown here right after our conference. These are the commune council elections where only one candidate has been put forward. The Polish press agency. There were some cancellations of candidate registration. Have all these procedures been completed by now? And also the question, how many constituencies will not have the election where, for example, only one candidate has been registered? As for cancellations, the last that we received was on Monday. It was examined on Monday, and later nothing else came up. So I suppose all the appeals or motions for cancellation have been now considered and closed. I think we hardly have any more time if the elections are the 16th. If there are some complaints now, then we would have a problem with the ballots. But I don't think any complaints are going to come up because there is no more time for that, and nothing new has come up since Monday. It takes a lot of time and effort to print all the ballots, and it's a crucial preparation stage for the election. In these local government elections, the heads of communes, counties, voivodeships are responsible for the printing of these ballots. But please remember that a commune that has 21 councillors in single constituency system has to have 21 different types of ballots. The same pertains to every constituency. So this is the sheer number of ballots that have to be printed in time and correctly. In the presidential election, the National Electoral Commission is responsible for the printing. There's over 30 million ballots. In the past, we sometimes had a tender, an RFP. A company would win the tender, and then after a few days, the company would back down because they would say they were not able to do it. From a technical point of view, these ballots are becoming more and more, in this election, they are more complicated because they are so large. They are really more a brochure than just a single piece of paper. And there are 4 types of ballots. They have to be marked properly for the people with sight impairment. There are holes in them or perforations, depending on the type of election that particular ballot is for. If it's for the commune council, county council, or mayor. Now we are printing these ballots 10 days before the election date, and they have to be delivered to the constituencies. And what if the company that wanted to print them, that participated in the tender, cancels their participation? And that's why the printing of the ballots, we believe, should also be exempt from the public procurement law. Another example is from the European election. We had a tender because the amount was over 110,000 euros. I think that's the threshold, or 115,000. So it was published Europe-wide, and we had a company from Germany, from Australia, from China. Well, in a tender, you can't exclude foreign companies. So that's how complicated this gets. That's why we would like the printing of the ballots to be also excluded from the Public Procurement Act, because we can then find a good, reliable company that will always do it in time. And as for the data, I said there are over 1,700 constituencies where there was only one candidate registered, and therefore there will be no voting. But all the details of this information, all the statistics, will be available after this conference finishes. Krzysztof Berenda, RMF Radio. A question to Mr. Czaplicki. To Minister Czaplicki, right? Yes, sir. When talking about the IT system, you mentioned that the NEC is underfunded, that you don't have enough money to create a comprehensive IT system that would not be one-off, but rather a comprehensive system for all types of elections. So my question is as follows. You have appealed with the MPs, the Ministry of Finance, the Prime Minister, and it's not worked. What is the amount that we are talking about? What's the relative amount or approximate amount? I did not say we don't have the money. We have this reserve. I was talking about the complications that mean we cannot employ new full-time employees. We don't have the money to pay the people who are working overtime, because in the public administration, in the public service, we cannot just adjust the remuneration levels as we see fit. And the Finance Committee rejects our arguments. So let me say again, we do have the money for the IT system. This particular tender was 429,000 zlotys, and we have that money. My point is that I cannot have a tender if I don't have my budget first. What is the amount? 429,000 was the software from Labino. So that roughly is the cost for every election. And then we also have the remuneration for the operators and such. But that's a different story. Ladies and gentlemen, someone said that why didn't we inform you about things before? Let me show you that we do inform people. I would like to say this now, because otherwise in a year there will be the same comment from you. Right now in Poland, we have the legal obligation to be domiciled, officially domiciled at a given address. Once this is abolished, and it is going to be abolished sooner or later, then we'll have to have a big central register of voters, register of eligible voters. And that should happen on the 1st of January 2016, when this domicile system is going to be abolished. So that's the 1st of January 2016. Right now, it's late autumn 2014. And for 3 years now, we've been trying to raise this point, also with you. Maybe you are not getting this message, maybe it's not getting across. So let me say this again. Today is the 14th of November. Please remember that we might have this problem, so please don't raise this as an accusation against us in a year. The central voters register is absolutely key if the legal domicile system is going to be abolished. And the NEC has been trying to alarm everybody to this fact for 3 years now. What happens to the voters register, we've been saying? What happens to the subsidies to schools? What happens to the potential conscription system? And so forth. And nothing has happened. And recently, the NEC has raised this issue again by filing this information with the Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Parliament, and the Prime Minister. We prepared a draft of a new chapter for the electoral law concerning the voters' register. Because we don't want to be caught by surprise when on the 2nd of January 2016 we realize we have an election coming up and we have no idea who can vote. And how can we prepare the voters list? So I hope that the special committee of the Parliament dealing with the electoral law will finally get down to doing something about it. We cannot make any preparations if we don't have the legal basis for it. For example, I cannot earmark funding for it because it's something which does not now exist in the law.
Quick follow-up question about the current elections. and the current system, because we are also getting different messages from the field, that there are still some problems with the very system, with the servers. What are the problems right now, today, right before the elections? What still has to be fine-tuned? Right now, we are adding up additional servers. That work will be finished today, late in the evening. We are now verifying the way of the functioning of the metrics, and these are the last actions that we are doing today. That is before the elections, because these are the only activities which still have to be performed in order to check, in order to verify. Thank you. Madam Natalia Markiewicz, Telewizja Republika, Republika TV. The question is as follows. The opposition is raising an alarm, saying that there are different possibilities of forging the elections, taking into account the results of the previous local elections, where only in the region of Mazovia 300,000 votes were invalid, including 90,000 votes invalid due to 2 crosses placed instead of 1 cross. Please, could you comment on this one? Madam, thank you for this question, because this is an excellent opportunity to correct these unjustified claims and information which is disseminated through the media and which is circulating in the broad public. As regards the invalid votes, they happened already in the first democratic elections to the local government in the 1990. Which means that in each single elections there are invalid votes occurring with a different intensity. However, it is true that an exceptional intensity of invalid votes happens to the local assemblies or provincial assemblies, the so-called sejmiks. Let me remind you that the first direct elections of this type happened in 1998. And across the country, the indicator of invalid votes amounted to 9.45, whereas the biggest number of the invalid votes were cast in the Mazovia voivodeship. It amounted to 11.68. However, second came the Warmia and Mazuria voivodeship with 11.03, and third, the Lubelskie voivodeship, 10.79. One has to add that almost everywhere this indicator of invalid votes exceeded 8%, and the reason of invalidity were the so-called empty ballot papers, because close to 70% of those invalid votes accounted for void or empty votes, whereas 30% were ballots on which 2 crosses were put. In 2002, in the following elections, the average indicator of invalid votes across the country amounted to 1443, whereas the biggest number of invalid votes was cast in the Lower Silesia voivodeship, where that indicator amounted to 19.02. Second came the Mazovia voivodeship with 17%, and third came the Kujawsko-Pomorskie voivodeship with 16.80%. In the 2006 elections, that average indicator amounted to 12.70 across the country. The biggest number of invalid votes were cast in the Wielkopolskie region, 16.64. Second came the Mazovia voivodeship, 14.60, and third came the Łódź voivodeship, 13.56. And in the last elections to local governments in 2010, that indicator of invalid votes to local assemblies was 12.06 on average. The biggest number of invalid votes were cast once again in the Wielkopolskie voivodeship, 15.27. Second came the Mazovia voivodeship, 14.03, and third Kujawsko-Pomorskie voivodeship, 13.08. But the reason for that invalidity was as follows. About 70% were the so-called empty ballot papers, whereas about 30% were ballot papers on which voters crossed more than one name on a couple of ballot papers. I would like to add that we have investigated in detail certain instances. We have looked at statistical data, and we looked at the Mazovia voivodeship. In 2010, it is a characteristic feature that the smallest number of invalid votes was cast in the county cities. That includes Warsaw, Ostrołęka, Płock, Sielce, and Radom. That indicator fluctuated at the level of 10%, whereas the biggest number were cast in such counties as Ostrołęckie, 25.05, in the Lipsk County, 23.94, in the Makowski County, 23.91, in the Żuromiński County, 22.45, in Szydłowiecki County, 22.42, and in Sierpecki, 22.28. The reason was similar. The vast majority constituted in casting ballot papers without any crosses, the so-called empty votes. Arkadiusz Wierzuk, TVN24 TV station. A follow-up question. What is the reason for that statistic? Why are there so many invalid votes which are cast to Sejmiki? Are the candidates not known to the voters, perhaps? Sir, we are asked many times to clarify this problem. However, the National Electoral Commission and the electoral authorities have no authorization whatsoever to investigate the reasons for such behavior of the voters. And we would like to refer you to scientific sources, to our eminent sociologists, political experts, social psychologists, even to different polling stations, even those which conduct polls, opinion polls, on the day of the elections. A voter can be asked on the day of the elections why he or she cast an empty ballot. And we will know what the reason is. And what is your opinion, Mr. Chairman? My opinion is as follows. As regards elections to counties and to the so-called Sejmiki, or voivodeship assemblies, the direct elections came about after 1998, or in 1998. Before, there were no counties. Whereas, as far as voivodeship assemblies are concerned, there were indirect elections. Individual municipalities delegated their representatives. Whereas, as far as the community level is concerned, municipality level is concerned, this indicator is quite low, because a municipality is close to the voter. When direct elections came to elect presidents of the cities, mayors, and leaders of the boroughs and heads of the villages, the indicator of invalid votes is low, because those candidates are well known to the voters. If a voter receives 4 ballot papers, then they vote first and foremost for those candidates whom he or she knows personally, and who, in the view of the voter, represent their interest in the direct way. Whereas representatives to the voivodeship assemblies or to counties reside in faraway cities, and the voter believes that it is not worth casting a vote. The voters might think that they do not know those people, that it is hard for them to make a choice. These are my assumptions. And I have got another question to Minister Czaplicki. Finishing off the information system and coming back to the publications of the Internal Security Agency, which is supposedly interested in the system, is this case closed as far as Internal Security Agency is concerned? And is there a risk of any interference from outside as regards the system? A report of the external auditor who investigated the issue of security of our IT system is positive. The auditor did not define any kind of infringements which could impact the security of the elections related with any external interference. As far as the Internal Security Agency is concerned, we believe that this case is closed at this stage, irrespective of the fact that the team that the President mentioned every now and then sends to all public institutions, probably also to the TV, information about suspected addresses in order to call the attention to the fact if there was no attempt of interference. This is a routine kind of activity of the Internal Security Agency, which we deem is indispensable in order to provide security to the electoral network and also to the security of all the assets of the National Electoral Commission and National Electoral Office. We believe that this case has been clarified and it is closed. The President has just mentioned what has been done about it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. Are there any more questions? I cannot see any. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for participation in the conference. Let me also tell you that we have set up an electoral press office for the time of the elections. The address is biuroprasowe.pkw.pl. It is at your disposal. I'm also at your disposal, Jacek Zakrzewski. I'm quoting my telephone number to you, 661 44 55 07. Jacek Zakrzewski. I am at your disposal. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.